Thank you, patrons. What up, nerds? Welcome back to the Nerdy Narrative. My name is Leslie Smith, and today on the channel, I'm going to talk about a book that this was the fourth time, I believe, that I have now read this. I'm talking about Necroscope by Brian Lumley. This is the first book in the series with the same title that many will call an urban fantasy series, but I think they're doing that because they've only read the first book when they say that. This is a horror series. There's not a whole lot of horror in book one. In fact, book one, I would say, is just a huge introduction to our two main characters, East versus West, good versus evil. It's a big book about setup, which absolutely goes off the rails and almost a completely different trajectory than what's laid out in the first book. I will also say, I think I enjoyed this the fourth time around more so than any other time I read this book. Granted, the first time I read it, I was a very young teenager. I did not really like all of the Cold War espionage spy stuff going on in the background because it felt a little bit like schoolwork to me. Now I am intrigued. I loved it. It made more sense to me as an adult, if that makes any type of sense. And I have also learned to have an appreciation for the narrative style that Brian Lumley chose for this one. And if my memory serves me correctly, as I progressed in the series, the style changed. It was more action rather than the tell, don't show style that this is. Necroscope has little pockets of action. It's a whole lot of history told through dialogue and stories between one character and another. We're going to get into all of that a little bit more, but first, let me tell you why it is that I picked this book up. It's totally the fault of my friend Nico from Nico's Book Reviews. He was doing this project where he was reading outside of his comfort zone. He has a long-time subscriber that's been recommending this series to him, and he was finally going to sit down and read it, and I sort of invited myself along as a buddy read. I'm so glad that I did because it feels good to get back to something that I know is extreme horror. Again, that's not really found in this one, but it is in the subsequent books of the series. I also thought there were only 8 books in this series. Turns out there's like 16. Necroscope was originally published in 1986. I found this series about 8 or 9 years after he got started, and apparently I read everything he had written in the series up until that point, thought it was over, and just never came back to see if other books had been coming out in the series. Back then, we didn't have all the cool apps and things you could sign up for on the internet that would drop you a line and say, hey, an author you've read a book by has a new one coming out. Sometimes I hate technology, and sometimes it comes in really stinking handy. I also want to start real quick and say that the covers that they have on the books these days, they're pretty cool, but they just don't beat the original ones. I'm so sad to say that I donated my collection that I had when we moved from Mississippi to Florida. Of course, they were just a mass market paperback, and I would like to have the trade, but only if I could get them with these covers. I still have them all on my Kindle though, so I'm just going to run that route while I decide if I want to repurchase them physically if I can get past those new covers. That's a decision for future me. So what is Necroscope all about? Maybe we should start with what the definition of a necroscope is. A necroscope is an individual who can communicate with the dead. The dead will willingly speak with this person. The counterpart to a necroscope is probably something you have heard of, a necromancer. In this series, a necromancer is someone who the dead will not speak with, but the necromancer takes information from the dead by breaking open the body and going through their insides and causing harmful damage. They steal the thoughts and things from the dead. So the dead do not like necromancers, but the necroscopes, that's someone that they do like. So there's our good versus evil on Necroscope and Necromancer. This is the series that also made me love anything about a necromancer. Those of you who have been around the channel for a while, there have been times I would have said in a video, I picked this up because it said necromancer in the book description. This was why, and I will say that I've never read another story or series about a necromancer that was as good as Necroscope. So our good versus evil right there, that's our players. And our Necroscope is Harry Keogh. Our necromancer is Boris Dragozani. This book takes place in the 1970s, late 1970s. We're in the midst of the Cold War, so this is also East versus West. In this book, we have the British espionage and we have the USSR espionage. Espionage. Our focus of the East versus West is the paranormal. They're using people with abilities to spy on the different countries, so there's no end to the intrigue that's going on. So it focuses on the stories of Harry and Boris. We learn all about their childhood. We learn that Harry is born with his ability to be a necroscope. How it is he discovers it, learns to use it, hone it, and all of the secrets about his past that he uncovers. Boris Dragozani, on the other hand, has no ability that he's born with. Instead, he makes a startling discovery of Dracula, and this book is named Tibor Ferensky, the thing in the ground who whispers to him, talks to him, and Tibor, in order to entice Boris to keep coming back and visiting him and bringing him offerings, bestows the ability of necromancy onto Boris, who then uses it to go on and be employed by the ESP branch of the USSR. Those scenes are so gory and gruesome, as he is called, whenever they catch a spy from the West that they've murdered, they want information, they call Boris Dragozani in. And the descriptions of how he uses his art of necromancy to extract information, they're going to have your toes curling, and my gosh. I know that the cover is a little bit misleading. The skull has fangs. There are vampires involved, but they're more heavily prevalent in the later books. As I said, this one's set up, but it's good setup. It's important information that's going to have a lot of bearing on the subsequent books, but I digress. Dragozani has his sights set on running the ESP branch that he works for, and he is attempting to use Ferensky, the vampire, the thing in the ground, in order to achieve those heights by taking this information from the dead. He wants to dominate, and his opposer, the champion of the dead and the living, is Harry Keogh. And you would think that what could the dead possibly do to protect Harry? To know that there is someone who will come and visit them and talk to them in the darkness, and even teaches them how to connect with each other. Harry is a game changer for those who have been dead and trapped in the darkness all alone. What do you think you would do if you had been trapped for years, centuries, and all of a sudden there's this light in your world and you're connected to a group, a community? What would you do to keep that? The stakes are very, very high, and yes, this book does take place back in the 70s, but it's rich with history. If you like a good spy novel, there's espionage, but I do have to say, I do not just recommend this series to anybody. It is very dark. It is extreme horror. It's gory, it's gruesome, it's depraved. The vampires in this book, in this series, are the worst of the worst. They give in with relish, ultimate abandon to all of their vices. They are the apex predator, murder, sexual encounters of wild kinds. Oh my gosh, I'm just thinking ahead of what's coming in the other books. Like, this is not stuff I've read in any other series. It's dark. I would very much encourage you to check out the first two from your library. That way you're not into it for any money, just a little bit of time investment, so you can make sure that this is a series you will enjoy reading, because it is not for the faint of heart. Brian Lumley won a lot of awards during the writing of this series. There are so many different elements that are woven in together and blended seamlessly to make just an unforgettable series. Time travel. We have the Mobius continuum. Of course, the whole speaking with the dead, which is new to me. I had never encountered necroscopes before. I think that might have been something that he came up with himself. Necromancy was already around, but he's done things with necromancers that I haven't read about before, but I have been searching for ever since. Things like that make it stand out from every other vampire series I've ever read before, any other vampire books, but it's so good that I've been looking for it ever since, and Twilight ain't it. This is the complete opposite of Twilight. I would actually love to read a book about the vampiri meeting the Twilight vampires just to see what they would do. Oh my gosh, it would scar you Twilight lovers for life. Something interesting about the vampires in the Necroscope series is that the vampire itself is a parasite. It's kind of this alien worm-like creature that burrows itself into the host, and it starts taking over the different body parts, the organs. It weaves itself into your brain, down your spinal column. You can remove it, although I wouldn't recommend it. It's hard to kill it. It goes to extreme lengths to protect itself. So it's not that you get bitten by a vampire and you become one. Something else you might be interested to learn is that what these vampires call the true nectar of life is the blood of another vampire. Oh my gosh, I hope some of you are picking up when I'm putting down with that little hint about what the future books will hold. I'm excited to know that I've only read half of the series, and it's been so long since I reread them the last time that it's almost like a new series again, though as I'm reading them, stuff comes back to me, and in talking with you all, it's triggering memories of future books that I'm so excited to experience again. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, Necroscope was originally published in 1986. You can still get these in paperback. There's a new cover on the trade paperback. You can get them digitally, and they are on Audible only. I was really disappointed that my library did not have the audiobooks. I did purchase the first one through Audible to see how I would like it. James Langston is the narrator. Complete game changer. I'm fairly certain that his narration is what had me enjoying this book so much. Anytime I've run into a book with that narrative style of tell, don't show, I've really leaned into the audiobook because that enhances it. That style to me is written to be told orally, so the audiobook was just absolutely outstanding for this series. So I'll definitely continue getting the audiobooks to pair with my Kindles to read along as an immersion read. I love this series. I can't say that I recommend it to just anyone, but if you're someone who regularly reads extreme horror, then I think you would enjoy this series. If you want to meet some really dark vampires, you will enjoy the series. If you love espionage, especially back in Cold War between Russia, China, the French, and the British and the USA, I think you would also love this book. But like I said, just try the first one from your library, give it a whirl, see what you think. Let me know if you do enjoy it and if you're going to continue the series after this first one. I'm going to wrap it up there. Thank you all so much for watching this review. Hope you enjoyed it, whether I swayed you to pick it up or whether it was on your TBR and what I told you, you knew this would not be one for you and I saved you from reading it. Again, thanks for your time. Thanks for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your day and I'll catch you in the next one. Thanks again to all of the Nerdy Narrative patrons, with a special shout out to the Nerds Radiant: Chad, John, Gail, Amanda, Star, Tara, Anne, Amanda, Andrew, Kate, Ev, and Sharon.